2, 1, go.
Hello, all. Welcome to the latest edition of Level Up with Times Techies. There's a lot of excitement in coding circles around the productivity gains of using AI tools, but data on the topic is a tricky thing to come by. Luckily for us, Ness Digital Engineering and Zinnov recently partnered to conduct a detailed analysis of the impact of adopting generative AI tools like Copilot and Code Whisperer in actual development environments. The collaborative study, titled Harnessing the Power of Generative AI in Transforming Software Productivity, some fascinating insights and should help young and aspiring coders get a grasp of just how powerful these AI tools are. We have with us Pari Natarajan, CEO of Zinnov, and Ranjit Tinaikar, CEO of Ness Digital Engineering. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thanks,
To
Atul.
Absolutely. To our audience members watching us live, please leave your questions in the comment section below, and we promise to try and take them up at the end of the webinar. So, Ranjit, why don't we kick it off with you? Why don't you give us a little bit of flavor of what your study uncovered?
Sure. Well, first of all, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having us over. And I must tell you, it's been fun working with Pari and his team for this report. The genesis of this started with I was with my board and about a year ago, and it was quite fashionable then for every board to ask the CEO this one question. So how does Gen AI transform your business? And everybody had to make up an answer to that question. But the thought that we had was, and I said this to the board, I said, we are in a unique position because what we did at Ness Digital Engineering was that we rolled out a software platform which all of our engineers are required to use, and it measures their productivity, velocity, quality of code. And so the thought came to our head that, listen, if I look around me, everybody's got a report on Gen AI. Yes, literally everybody, all the software vendors, all the consulting firms and things like that. And there were a bunch of management consulting firms who were talking about how Gen AI affects software engineering. And I said, well, they don't do software engineering. We do software engineering, and we have the data on it. So why don't I reach out to my good friend Pari and think about how we could sort of do a research paper on it. But this would not be a sales pitch. This would be almost a purely analytical exercise to truly understand what Gen AI does to software engineering. And so what we did was we actually rolled out Copilot and Code Whisperer to close to 150 engineers around the world. 70% of them were actually in East Europe, 30% were in India. That wasn't a requirement. It was just the way the engineers were there. We did it across 5 live client engagements. So this is not some, clinical research. This was live software engineering projects. We did it across a wide range of programming environments, C++, Java, all of that. A wide range of skill sets, junior, mid-range, and senior developers. And essentially tried to make sure that we weren't sort of, biased in any way in the kind of sample we took. And what we did was we ran 7 sprints of every software engineering cycle without Gen AI. Then we gave these people Gen AI tools to use them. And then we measured the next 7 sprints. That was the research. And we looked at 4 things, 4 dimensions. The first dimension was, does the experience of the programmer affect productivity, right? So do junior have a better use of Gen AI than senior? That was dimension 1. Dimension 2 was, does the programming environment, the complexity of the programming environment, affect the productivity measures? The third was, does the task that you do, right? Does the type of task affect the way Gen AI affect productivity? And last but not the least, the first 3 were focused on productivity. The fourth one, we said, how does it affect the happiness and the motivation levels of the software engineers? Those are the 4 things we did. And we had some fascinating findings. And Pari, you and I should sort of riff on this. but because he and I sort of looked at the numbers and we developed some joint implications. So I'll take the first, you take the second, Pari, and maybe that's how
Mhm.
we do it. So the first one was the experience level of the programmer. And what we found was that in both the cases, junior programmers as well as senior programmers got productivity benefits from using the Gen AI tool. Yes. But the big difference was that the senior programmers, their productivity improvement was significantly higher. In some cases, 2x that
Mhm.
gains that you got from the junior programmers, right? And that was partly because when you're in a programming environment, the Gen AI tool is not just something that gives you options. You need to have the ability to select the right options, ask the
Right.
right questions, and that's the limitation of a Gen AI tool. And so our findings were that over time, the productivity gap between a senior and a junior programmer actually expands and increases over time.
Mm.
And the question then we asked ourselves was, well, what does it mean? Does this mean we need less junior programmers? And
Mm.
what does it mean for my kids? And they're applying for jobs. Does that mean there are less jobs for them? That was
Mm.
the question. And if you have to remember, Akhil, the entire IT services industry in India is based on the pyramid. The pyramid is you hire a lot of young, very talented professionals, and you train them up, and they go up the pyramid, and the way the margins are structured, actually the profitability of a junior programmer is higher than that of a senior
Mhm.
programmer.
Mhm.
That's how the pyramid is structured. Now, if your junior programmers get compressed, well, what does it mean for some of our large IT services companies? Yes. And our findings were that, yes, you will see a pyramid. I mean, this is not our findings, this is our postulation that
Mm.
one of the implications of this productivity gap between junior and senior means that the pyramid may not be as broad as you thought it to be. And this has implications for what does it mean for the young professionals who want to get into that uh, profession. But I'll hold my thoughts there because
Mm.
that's a different type of discussion. And
Mhm.
that was hypothesis one. Why don't I hand off the second one to Pari?
Sure. The second was the type of work the engineers are working on. If you look at most of the engineers, the majority of time is spent on sustaining existing applications or products. And you work on maybe 20, 30% of your time on building completely new version 1.0 of products. What we found interesting was when you're sustaining a product, the productivity increase was much higher because
Mm.
what happens in this scenario is it's able to understand the existing code base and able to suggest the kind of changes you need to do. And it also helps engineers keep to the standard of the code what they need to write. So it's very easy for them to keep up with the kind of coding standards and also to create test cases. So like, for example, you're sustaining an existing product and you're fixing a specific bug. You need to go back and write test cases. There are sometimes in products, there are millions of test cases. You got to really figure out which are the test cases you need to write and also create some testing codes. Those aspects are being significantly automated with this. So the implications are very interesting. So one, because the productivity around sustainability of code increases, and the productivity is not that different because if you're writing a V1, the version 1.0 of code, you're writing new algorithms. When you're writing new algorithms, not been written before by anybody
Mm.
else, it's very difficult for any of the Gen AI platforms to be able to create the code for you. So you need the engineers to, brilliant engineers, strong analytical engineers to be able to write these codes. Another implication of this is very interesting. If you look at how large product companies work and how they use outsourcing, one other area they use outsourcing is, hey, I want to work on some of the core key products, but I have this 10 different products I've built over the last 15 years. I need somebody else to manage this effectively.
Mm.
The big concern for them before is, hey, my engineer built this product for the last 10 years. And it's very difficult for me to transition this to a third-party outsourcing provider, especially in an offshore location. But today, because sustaining of this code became easier, and also we have figured out that because it's able to understand the code, the
Mm.
knowledge transfer between one team to another is also easier. So it not just increases the productivity of sustaining existing code, but increases reduces the complexity of knowledge transition. So this interesting one thing, what Ranjit mentioned about the impact on the pyramid, but also it increases the addressability of what is possible from a global delivery model.
Yeah.
So it's another interesting insight which came out from the study.
It's
Okay.
yeah, that can really transform our supply chains of talent, right?
So Ranjit, do you want to touch on what the
The
implications
third
are for
one.
younger workers? Huh?
Yeah,
Oh,
the
the third
third
one,
one.
please.
Yeah, the third one we had to deal with programming environment and complexity, right?
Okay.
Different programming environments have different levels of complexity, and it could be, they call it the psychometric complexity of the code. I won't go into the details. That's one factor. The other is simple things like how many API calls did that code make? Is it a standalone piece of code, or does it require you to understand the code in other parts of the program? What's the programming language, and how much does it depend on a good understanding of the full set of libraries that are required to code and things like that? So there's a whole set of dimensions that they use for assessing programming complexity. And what we found was that the gap between due to Gen AI productivity was maybe 10-15%. Okay, that, given the kind of study we did, was not significant enough in terms of whether Gen AI really improves productivity or not for highly complex environment. So we came to the conclusion that, listen, the use of Gen AI tools is not free. They cost, and they have a lot of computing costs, and they have a lot of training costs, and there's a lot of ramp-up costs. And if the productivity improvement is in the range of 10 or 12%, then you should assume it's almost flat. So what we found was that more complex environments, the impact of Gen AI productivity was relatively small. Yeah. And so we would recommend that when organizations are deploying Gen AI tools, one has to be thoughtful about which tools to use in which environments and what purpose. It is quite possible, by the way, that we looked at a generation of Gen AI capability that is just 1 year old. If a Gen AI tool were to be trained on a complex environment, I'm sure it could also do that. But those are the selective bets one has to make. So I would say in more standardized and routinized programming environments that a large base of users uses, you will see the benefits increasing over time. But if they are very custom solutions, very custom architectures, then you have to put a lot of effort to get your Gen AI tool to learn it, to use it, and it may not make sense there. So I think the implication of this is also for how we think about learning and development for our talent, right? Increasingly, you will be asked, and if you just combine what Pari said and what I'm saying, we use the word software engineers quite commonly in this industry. But I make a distinction between software engineers and software developers. And the distinction is that engineers are problem solvers, developers code to requirements.
Okay.
And the need of the separation between software developers and software engineers will expedite with this. The pure software developers who are not very skilled at a particular business domain or a particular area of knowledge, who can problem solve in that area, will be far more valued than if you are just a Java programmer, right? Because the system will start replicating your knowledge very quickly. That's the real insight.
So adding on to what Ranjit mentioned, right? What does it mean for engineers who are coming in? So you need domain capabilities. If you look at even Akhil, you're using ChatGPT, in areas we know how to use the prompts, you get better answers, right? So you need to know what to ask the Gen AI tools. The ones who have deeper analytical or domain or functional capability in a specific area, can pure language capability. Now, so it's abstraction. If you look at 10, 20 years ago, or 50 years ago, engineers used to write in mission code, right? And then it abstracted it to C, then abstracted to C++, to Python. Now we are getting into natural language in terms of how you're going to write code. But what has not changed is people would have to have domain capability. The interesting thing for engineers now, if you're in college, if you're a junior engineer, one thing to worry about, hey, I'm going to get a job. Second is how do I build my deep domain expertise with using all of these tools which is available, almost free for many scenarios, and get ready when they're coming to the job market. And that would potentially change in terms of number of junior engineers and what a junior engineer could do, because we measured what the junior engineer's existing capabilities. But if that changes over the next 2 years, that could be fundamentally different, which means that the learning and development with the university level, even when we hire them, what do we need to do with these engineers has to change from what we are doing today.
And isn't that two-way, in fact? The abilities of the engineers will keep improving and the AI tools themselves will become better. So there's that interplay as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. The AI tools, we are like what Ranjit mentioned, we are in the version 1.0 of these AI tools. There's going to be a whole lot of development which is going to happen on the next few years.
On the question of job losses, I found this fascinating insight from a lot of tech executives who told me that even if productivity increases a lot, that just means that you will create more software, and for that you will need still more people. So there's that dynamic as well.
Yes,
Yeah, Ranjit,
I could agree more. See, listen, I'll give you an analogy from another industry. Okay. It was actually, forget that analogy. Let me use the IT services industry. So, yeah, it was the onset of the industrial revolution, so the internet that created the offshoring industry. And about 20 years ago, we were trying to predict how much offshoring would India be able to support. And at that time, it was considered quite bold. And this is a NASSCOM report, which I was sort of in the process of being part of. And the prediction was that by 2010, India would have a $2 billion IT services industry. Okay. And at that time, emphasis was 200 million, 300 million. So 2 billion sounded like a big number. And then somebody in the room, I said, guys, you're thinking very linearly. This is not a mathematical model. You have to really think of the demand out there and then work backwards and then predict what the size of the industry is. And so at that time, NASSCOM went out with a very bold prediction that by 2020, the Indian IT services industry would be $50 billion. Well, guess what? They hit the $50 billion 10 years earlier, right? That is sort of a response to your question, Akhil. Everything that we discussed right now was on the supply side of the equation. Right? But if you just look at it from the supply side, then that's a very different way to think, because at that time in NASSCOM, we were thinking, well, how many engineering schools do we have? And therefore, how many graduates can we create and all of that, right? But if you look at the demand side, what Gen AI does is basically create a whole new set of applications, a whole new set of use cases, and frankly, allows us to enter domains that we could not in software engineering. That opens up the market. So your target addressable market increases. So that's the point that I think my colleagues in the industry are making, that the Gen AI thing will improve productivity, maybe 50%, maybe 60%, but the demand might go up 3x. So the supply-demand gap might actually increase, not decrease. But we need more engineers, not developers.
Okay, that's a fascinating distinction you have to make.
Yeah, and to just add on to what Ranjit mentioned, right? What the productivity improvement is going to accelerate time to market for companies, both tech companies as well as enterprises. And if you talk to any CIO, any CTO, what they have in the roadmap and the money they've allocated for a year, it's just a huge difference. They have so much more they need to get done in the roadmap. What it's going to do is to enable these companies to accelerate their overall roadmap of their application, their experience, and all of that. So that's the benefit. It's not really going to reduce the number of jobs.
I think that brings us to the fourth dimension of our analysis. And if you notice, the first three were productivity. The last one was on happiness, motivation of our engineers. As you know, during the pandemic years, attrition was a big challenge.
Mm.
And there was a great resignation and things like that. And we wondered what Gen AI did to our engineers. And we found that, interestingly, senior engineers reacted to Gen AI very differently than junior engineers. Yeah.
Mm.
Senior engineers said it actually allowed them to create more time in a day to actually problem solve. So remember, so I came from that era that Pari described, that I used to code in machine language. Okay, I used to
Mhm.
code Zilog Z80 microprocessors. Now, before you started coding, it was standard practice that you actually sat down on a piece of paper and drew the various flow diagrams so that your code was proper and efficient. I don't know if in the world of visual programming, a lot of that happens. So you get
Mhm.
a lot of code, but maybe inefficient code. And what senior programmers value is the extra time to do problem solving around the code, to really define what the requirements are, engage them. Junior programmers looked at it very differently. For them, it allowed them to become productive and relevant much faster. So their learning curve increased. And frankly, they felt very gratified that we were experimenting with new technologies and putting it in their hands. So that kind of thrill may be short-lived. It may not go for a long period of time. But but overall, if you look at a team made up of junior and senior programmers, what I hope happens, and I think this is an opportunity, but all of us should, is that now junior programmers have more time to have collaborative problem-solving sessions with the junior ones.
Mm.
And as a result of which, the engagement of our engineers will increase. And as a result of which, I think attrition will improve. Because attrition is not just a function of compensation, in my humble opinion, it's how effectively you engage talent. And this could actually create more time for engagement.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And if you look at, if you talk to engineers in any company and why, the main reason for attrition, right? Compensation is a hygiene factor. Most of the people leave the team because they don't like the manager. They don't have a role model in the team. And many times it's not that the managers don't want to spend time with them. It's just they don't have time to spend and
Mm.
mentor these engineers. They're so busy with other regular tasks, in like what Ranjit mentioned, reviewing the code and so on. So now it's going to free up time for leadership team to spend more time mentoring, coaching the teams, and that will also drive a level of engagement, which is
Mm.
not going to automatically happen in terms of level of intervention we need to do to ensure the senior teams are effectively spending the free time in engaging with their own teams.
Mm. Okay, so now for students today who are going to enter the workforce in the next few years, what should they do? How do they keep up with all these, quite frankly, very rapid changes occurring in this space, right? How do you? What's your advice to them? Who wants to
Pari,
go,
you want to
Ranjit?
go first? Pari, you want to go first, or?
Yeah, go ahead, Ranjit. Yeah.
All right. I'll give you a rather less dramatic version of what I think will happen.
Okay.
The less dramatic thing is this: it only accelerates what has been happening for the last 20 years. Okay.
Mm.
So what it does is this, right? If you look at in any profession, not just in software engineering, higher levels of specialization create higher levels of compensation and higher levels of specializations in specific areas. You look at an analog is the medical profession.
Mm.
Today, if you are a general practitioner, your economic model of that business is very different from if you are a specialist in a particular body part or a
Mhm.
particular type of disease, right?
Mm.
And that's the point that I think Pari was making. Just knowing Java or C++ will get commoditized. But if you now become a specialist who does Java in trading technologies, if you become a specialist in C++ for embedded software in medical devices, now you started getting to be more and more specialized because you just don't know the technology, but you also know the business domain and its unique requirements. I think that has already been happening in the last 20 years. But if you were to see the effect of Gen AI, it'll accelerate it. Because the only way you'll keep your compensation and your career path growing is if you become more and more specialized in some function like marketing, sales, service, or some business domain like insurance, medical, or whatever.
Yeah, so
Pari, do you
my
wanna?
yeah, so my view is if you take why do people want to go to IIT, they want to go to Harvard Business School and others, not just because this teaching is great. It's really about the peer quality, right? The quality of your peers, and you learn from your peers. In some level, all of that learning capability is now with Gen AI, right? All of that. So you could potentially have a same peer quality as some of the top students in some of the top universities would have. So it democratizes learning for anyone coming from a small village, and they need to be able to get access to high quality peer learning, and your Gen AI is your buddy to help you in learning that. So completely democratizes how learning is going to be done over the next few years. So I don't think the youngsters have anything to worry about. It's really being bold and curious and use all the technology which is available. Right now, everyone is equidistant from everyone else. And this has made it even more. And I think its opportunity is going to be tremendous for people who are coming out of colleges.
What about citizen developers? Do all of these things then allow more people to become coders who are traditionally not? I think they're called citizen developers, right?
Yeah, so all of us are already citizen developers. All of us live life in Excel. Some level, the future of, right now we are spending time in Excel. The future is going to be using natural language.
Okay. Um, uh, uh, what about other these AI tools now? Do these youngsters need a lot of practice with it? How difficult is it to use today? Is it simple, just create this bunch of code and it does it?
Okay, so one of our customers deployed it across 8,000 of their engineers, right? And when they deployed, they thought it's going to be a massive change management process. Like anything else you do, there's a lot of resistance in you bring in anything new in the process. But surprisingly, in this scenario, they didn't find a lot of resistance. People, like what Ranjit mentioned, people wanted to, excited to use this technology because it enables them to get better faster, free up their time, be more productive. To some level, it's been one of the easier technology for engineers to adopt.
I think it has something, yeah, please. I think it has something to do with the fact that everyone got to test it a little bit, right, by themselves before it went, before doing it in a office setting. Please, Ranjit, you were saying something.
No, I was just saying I completely agree. The whole point is it's natural language, right? So, what you will find is that Gen AI will be a different, and I'll link it back to your point around citizen developers too. The barriers to entry into the world of Gen AI-enabled development tools will be very low. But it's a bit like the Abhimanyu story. Once you get into the Chakravyuh, then it's hard to come out. Let me explain what I mean. Um, Citizen developers are fine if you're building small widgets that are sort of off on their own. But if you're building enterprise solutions, they have to deal with architectural integrity, response times, security, governance. So citizen developers are harder to manage in that scenario, right? So what it actually does is the Gen AI and some of these low-code, no-code platforms that are out there will produce code faster, but it'll become harder and harder to manage it if you allow it to go rampant.
Right.
And so your total cost of ownership of a software code could potentially increase, although the productivity of writing that code improves, right? It's a bit like, I remember when I used to create presentations and there wasn't any PowerPoint. I used to do it on like 3 pieces of board and write on it with a sketch pen. It took me the same amount of time. Today I create 100-page PowerPoint decks, but that doesn't mean that they are effective.
Yeah. I've heard that if you write too much code, it's called spaghettification or something. I've heard.
Exactly.
So we're running out of time. Final thoughts about the future. How excited are you for both for AI automation and final bit of advice for young students? Pari?
Yeah, I think I'm super optimistic about what is possible, and we saw that in the last wave when tech companies, venture capitalists, tech services companies, all of them commit to a particular technology area. And you've seen a massive adoption. It happened in cloud, it happened in mobile. Now it's happening in AI. We're just in the early stage of adoption. And I think from just the tech services industry, today it's about 200 billion from whatever
Mm,
50 was assumption it grew 4 times more by 2022. And I think the similar kind of possibility exists over the next decade.
Ranjit?
I concur with Pari. I would just add one thing, right? So like I said before, I do think that the demand for new use cases and application of Gen I
Mm,
is going to be fantastic. I think it's going to skyrocket. It's just the beginning, as Pari said.
mm,
I also think it changes the talent supply chain and what it takes to be successful in that. There's a third thing I'd like to add to that, which is this technology over time will become extremely disruptive.
mm,
And we have yet to figure out how to regulate it.
mm,
And so regulations, the legal risks, uh, the average person talks about deep fake, but that's just the beginning.
mm,
And there are several of our clients today who have actually banned the use of Gen AI because
mm.
it puts them at regulatory risk, compliance risk. So I think I'm extremely excited, but like with any technology, one has to be thoughtful about how to deploy it and quickly learn from any mistakes we may make along the way, which we surely will.
Mm. Okay, thank you so much. We definitely need more control studies like the ones both of you have done. So thank you again, both Ranjit and Pari, and to our audience.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thanks,
Bye.
Akhil. Take care. Bye.